Alright, so this was something that I never thought I would be doing. Like, I technically forgot about this series until I joined this little Twitter group who are like dedicated to getting a remaster of the Legacy of Kain series. And anyway, one of them often compared the series to Darksiders, and I ended up deciding I would do at least two videos on the subject. Now, there's this one, which is me recommending it. The other one is going to be an about video, which is me going in depth on what the series entails. So, yeah, there's that also. But for now, I will mainly be recommending it, and I would start with just giving you an idea of what the series is like. Now, throughout the series, you play members of the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. I know it seems pretty grim, but just bear with me on this. Now, the first one, and I believe, well, actually, no, the first one happens both during and after the Armageddon has happened. So the trumpet is sounded, and the angels and demons have already begun fighting, and that's when war kind of comes onto the scene. And the first game you play is War, and the second one, which takes place as the apocalypse is happening, you play as Death, who, and also I should say from the beginning, I'm going to be spoiling the shit out of some stuff here. So, in the first game, you are accused of starting the apocalypse as War, like you're briefly in the midst of it as the apocalypse is happening, and then you're brought back to Earth years later after it's happened. Now, and then as Death, who's like the oldest of the horsemen, he doesn't believe War is guilty. Like, he's like, my brother, he does not have it in him to do something this dishonest and disingenuous and cowardly. If he wanted to start an apocalypse, he would make sure we all knew it in advance. Like, he's too honorable for that. So that's what Death is about in the second game. In the third game, you play as Fury, who's like the only girl in the Horsemen who is... Like, she was an insufferable bitch, I'm not gonna lie. Like, she was very arrogant. Like, she thinks she should be the leader of the Horsemen, basically. And you see her get humbled in the third game. And the timeline of the games is very messed up. The first one, as I said, begins first in the apocalypse, in the midst of it, as it's happening. Then you're brought back to Earth years later after Earth has basically become a war zone, and there are these various factions fighting over Earth now. Like, it doesn't even resemble Earth anymore. It looks like a fantasy setting almost, with elements of post-apocalyptia to it. And I don't mean that in like, if post-apocalyptia is an actual series or game, I don't mean it looks like that. I mean, it looks like it's after the apocalypse, there's still human buildings, but everything's gone to shit. So, basically, imagine California, but worse. And the second one kind of happens, it's still, like, throughout the game, it takes place while the apocalypse is still going on. So, in between the time when War has been imprisoned and while the apocalypse is raging on, because War is imprisoned for a long-ass time. So, in that time, that is when the story of Death is happening. And Fury's story, I want to say it happens around a similar time frame, but I can't really say because I haven't played that game, and I never finished 2. Not that it was boring, I just took a break from it and forgot it. It was fun, though, and in 1 and 2, you get to use melee weapons and ranged weapons. My favorite weapon to use in those games was the pistols. And I'm hoping in the fourth game we get to play as Strife, and they've gotten mixed up like the Horsemen's names in this series. Like, I don't think Strife and Fury were actually names of the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And this thing combines religion with fantasy in a way. Like, it really does. There's also some Norse stuff in it. Well, stuff that reminds me of Norse stuff. And yeah, you get swords, scythes, a whip. And these are weapons that each of the horsemen use. And and Strife uses a pair of pistols. And here's the funny thing. The pistols you use in 1 and 2, they belong to Strife. So something shitty had to have happened to him before you get your hands on his guns. Like, I really want to know what happened to him, because he's the horseman I am the most interested in. Because he almost kind of reminds me of, well, he's kind of a gunslinger. Anyway, he kind of reminds me of someone who's just like he's done some shit and he kind of has to live with the repercussions of it mentally. The closest you get to getting a feel for his personality was there was this one game called, I believe it was called Genesis, where it had him in war, and you get they have a pretty good dynamic. Anyway, that's like a mobile game though. But anyway, I've veered off subject here. Point is, it's a fun series, and there's this one faction. They are a shit stain throughout the series and a pain in the ass, but they are the reason some stuff happens. This is the Charred Council. They keep heaven and hell in check. And by that I mean, they used to go to war constantly. The Charred Council stopped them, and the Horsemen became their enforcers. So anyway, and this game came out in a weird period for me. Like, the first one came out in 2011 or 2012. It's hard to remember. And that was a weird period for me because that was back when there was still the whole 2012 scare. Like, I actually believed in that shit. Like, I was really scared the world would end on 2012. Or December of 2012. Thankfully, it didn't. Although some people probably wish it had. But anyway. So you got that. You get to play as a horseman in each game. They each have a very distinct personality. Like, War is kind of the honorable one. Like, honor is like this really no negotiation. He has to be honorable or he will be pissed. And he used to not be that way. There was a comic where it shows why he has a larger stone hand. Death actually cut off that hand. Because back then he was kind of arrogant. And it's kind of funny considering what you see in Darksiders 2, because they must be very close for him to actually be like, this is bullshit. My brother would never do something this stupid. So, yeah. And 2, I get the feeling he's more of a family above all else kind of person. It's like, okay, if you're going to condemn my brother, you might as well make sure you got the right guy, because I'm going to be pissed if I find out he was innocent. And I think he did this against the Charred Council's wishes. Anyway, Fury is, again, arrogance incarnate, and Strife, I can't really comment on yet. I want to play as him, and I look forward to the day that game comes out, if it ever comes out at all. And that's the video. Now, you do have to fight the forces of heaven and hell throughout this game, especially in 1. Like, there was this one part of the map where it's nothing but sand. Like desert sand, and you ride your horse through it. And you can either use your sword or shoot your gun. And I think that's all I can really say on the game. Like, it's a fun game to play. It does get repetitive after all, and there are some moments in the first one that really pissed me off. I am not going to bullshit you there. It really does annoy me sometimes, but yeah, the first 2 are pretty good. 3 I can't comment on. I want to get at some point. I probably should anyway. Also, if you play the first one, Mark Hamill is kind of like this guiding figure throughout the story. Like, he's an asshole in the game. He plays, I can't remember his name, but he does a really good job. War is voiced by Gar, the guy who voiced Gar in Naruto, the English dub. I don't know who voiced Death in 2, but he did a damn good job. Same with the lady who voiced Fury in 3. But anyway, yeah, that's the video. I've dragged this out longer than I should have, but actually there's one other thing I forgot to touch on, which is kind of the plot of each game. Like, I'm not going to give away too much on this part, but the first one, you were supposed to investigate and find out what really happened and why the apocalypse happened because when it happens in the first game, it was not supposed to happen by then. Humanity was supposed to evolve further before the apocalypse would happen and the seals would be broken. That was War's job in the first game, and then he uncovers a conspiracy, and there was more happening than he ever thought, or the council thought, and you will really be hating the council by the end of the game. Like, you already hate them in the beginning or don't like them, but by the end you will be even more pissed at them. The second game, is kind of Death just trying to prove his brother's innocence, and that's kind of like the starting motivation behind it, and you gradually learn more about him. Like how he... Because there's this one thing I forgot to mention about Death, is you kind of learn a little bit about his background. Like, here's the thing about the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. In the Darksider series, they are what's known as Nephilim. Now, Nephilim in actual Hebrew, I think, mysticism, or their version of the Bible, a Nephilim was essentially those things that caused the flood. Now, what I mean by that is, there were these angels called Watchers, or Grigori. They were supposed to watch humanity, but they fell in love with human women, had children with them, and they became these giants. They would kill the mothers that birthed them by literally being born. Anyway, these things were called Nephilim, and God got so pissed about it that he eventually flooded the world. I think it's been years since I read that story. But anyway, however, in Darksiders, a Nephilim is born from the union of, I believe, angels and demons. Now, the horsemen are Nephilim themselves, but the rest of their brethren were... Let's just say they were a problem. They were a big pain in the ass for everyone, and unfortunately they had to be wiped out. The horsemen kind of agreed to this in exchange for a shit amount of power, and they did it. They wiped out their own people. And another side of that fight had clean hands. I'm going to admit that right now. Like, the Nephilim wanted to take Earth for themselves, and humans already lived there. Or they wanted to take this one realm for themselves, but yeah. And the horsemen basically sold out their own kind. And I don't think they were happy about it themselves, because you see that in Death and in Strife's reflection on it. I mean, Death, throughout the game, you see him lamenting it. So anyway, you have that and him trying to prove War's innocence, and anyway, that's more or less something that you get in 2. And in 3, it is Fury both hunting down the 7 deadly sins on Earth, and also becoming more of a humble person, like less arrogant. That is the plot, and that is where I think I will end the video. So have a nice day, and remember the game was rigged from the start.